Welcome to a Community Partners interview, where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Lilly Cereghini, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Robert Hocking, who is the founder for Adaptive Living. Adaptive Living specializes in providing whole home safety solutions in Ottawa, ensuring every part of your home is optimized for accessibility and safety. Their mission was shaped by a personal experience involving a tragic accident, leading them to focus on creating safe and accessible homes that empower independence, dignity, and joy. Their services include home safety audits, safety retrofits, and adaptive renovations like accessible bathrooms, kitchen modifications, and stair lift installation to support seniors and those with mobility or cognitive disabilities. They also provide disability remodeling, home modifications for seniors, and complete home renovation for the disabled in Ottawa, tailored to each family's needs. Thanks for joining us today, Robert.
Hey, Lily, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Robert, could you tell us a little bit more about you? What inspired you to co-found Adaptive Living?
Well, it's a good question. So my background is in business strategy and academia. So I spent many years working with companies that were pre-revenue right up to blue chip companies. And I've had the chance over the course of about a 30-year career to work with many of the biggest names, company names in the world. And so my focus was always on understanding, how consumers behave and how companies can be better at serving the needs of the people that they rely on. So what happened was I was based in the UK for many years, and as well working in Chicago, New York. And we were, as part of my background, I've also worked extensively in academia. So I was a teaching fellow at Oxford University in the business school. I've guest lectured at London School of Economics, the University of Delft Technology, and when I returned to Ottawa here, I was the inaugural entrepreneur resident. So my background was really in trying to understand what makes companies tick. But I grew up in a family with tradespeople, and as somebody that really tries to help understand how companies can be better at serving the needs of customers, one of the things that I was always fascinated by was how the trades are. And this is not a comment on individuals in the trades. It's more an observation that a lot of them don't necessarily have the best business skills. And so for what you hear often about the trades is that, they can be difficult to reach. You don't necessarily know what you're getting, et cetera. So I ended up moving back to Ottawa during COVID. My wife, who's from Ottawa, wanted to move back with her kids. We came back, and it was time for me to pivot and do something else. And so I had my business partner, who is my brother-in-law, have been doing renovations for about a dozen years. But the interesting angle, and you touched on it in the intro, was that he had grown up in family with muscular dystrophy. So he didn't have the gene, but his mother, sister, and brother did. And he was a caregiver to them early on. Mother and sister passed away, and the brother fell in the shower and died as a result of the fall. So I was interested in doing something here in town. I had a background in knowing how to basically run businesses. My business partner had a background in renovations, and we started to look more closely at it. And of course, this triggering moment of him losing his brother was really caused us to take a hard look. Well, if it's difficult to sometimes engage and find contractors of the trades, what's it like if you've got risk or a health condition that's the center of your life and you need to make modifications? So what was fascinating was that was going through the process of doing the research for the company and looking what was available, and we recognized that and I'll switch from speaking more broadly about the trades more specifically with us. Myself and my partner have both trained to do home safety assessments, and what's interesting with our clients is these are not people that are merely bored of their environments. So there is always an element of risk in their circumstances. And our clients range from children who may have a disability and their family needs to make a modification, to people that have Parkinson's, Huntington's, wheelchair users, right up to people who want to age in place. And what's interesting about what triggers them to contact us is that they've identified this risk. Many cases, many clients we've dealt with, they're hoping to be discharged from the hospital, but they can't be discharged because they don't have proper safe access to their home. So we studied home safety to do home safety assessments, and it was really understanding, where the critical risk areas in the home for people with different conditions. And then we also have to combine that kind of understanding of these conditions and the risk elements in the home with an understanding of accessibility code as well as building code. So I'd really say that what prompted it was necessity. My own personal necessity, the fact that there was this triggering event with my brother-in-law losing his brother, and then recognizing that there was a shortage in the marketplace of people who really could understand the condition, the accessibility standards required in building code, and combine those, and we created adaptive living.
I love that, because the building code being separate from the AODA, it doesn't have the same oomph. And even the AODA doesn't have that much in the way of oomph. So it's good to have specialists around who know what they are doing.
And the other thing I'd add, and I remember when we were doing the research for this came up often, which is, this idea that you need to have bedside manner. So, you're already dealing with someone who's vulnerable. You're going into their environment. And the thing is, it's important is you don't see the world. I'm fortunate that I'm able-bodied, but my job is to get under the skin and to understand the world that's the reality of our clients. And I would say that, flipping the script again, my job isn't to walk in with a hammer and say, now, where do you want me to hit this? My job is to actually understand, your concerns and your lifestyle considerations to then provide guidance on how to adapt your space. So before we ever talk about making a physical modification, I have to understand where you feel you're at risk or where I identify risk areas and make recommendations accordingly. So I don't go in with a preconceived idea. It's not like I'm a bathroom specialist and all I do is a bathroom. I'm looking around the home at where the risk exists and then saying, okay, on the basis of what you're struggling with, and by the way, making recommendations not for today, but for the next 5-10 years, to be able to say, you know what, you're not in a wheelchair today, but you're likely going to be in a wheelchair, and this is what you should consider. These are the dimensions for proper accessibility that you need to have built into a solution. And I can tell you, there is simply, unless you have the training, unless you do it every day, you just can't see the world. As a regular contractor, you can't even understand really what a client needs.
That's brilliant. While doing my research, I saw that you have a couple of services that you offer. Could you tell us a little bit more about those?
Sure. So as you rightly pointed out in the introduction, everything starts with the home safety assessment. And what's interesting about that is, we also publish a lot of content. And I'll take the example of someone who's looking to age in place. So they're a senior. So probably in 85% of the cases that we're contacted about, it's the adult children of the senior. And we write content to inform, educate, and in this particular scenario, we've written a piece for the adult child to give them advice on how to navigate modifications with their parents. Because what often happens is a senior, I'll give you an example. When my father was 75 years old, I looked at him. I was just kind of staring at him. I asked him, I said, how do you feel inside? He said, I feel 23. And so people's psychological state is often, particularly with seniors, it's out of sync with their physical reality. And so what's fascinating to me is some people it's very evident. Perhaps they were born with a condition or they're in a wheelchair now. But other people are, you have to basically walk slowly through modifications to get them there. So when we go in and start with our process, which is this home safety assessment, we're often looking at things that they are not aware of, they've overlooked, or they take for granted. I'll give you a simple example: is area rugs. We were invited into a woman's home. She'd lived in this home since 1965. It was this giant house, and the whole home was area rugs. And I tripped in the home, and she's 94 years old. And so For her, that's just the way she lives. Her house has always been that way. But for us, when you look at things like lighting levels or the unevenness of paving stones or the fact that a hardwood staircase doesn't have carpet treads, or a very, very common one we encounter is in bathrooms. We have a piece that we've written for clients that talks about the friction coefficient that's needed for proper floor tiles in a wet environment. So that process that we start with always documents the areas of concern. We highlight, on the basis of your condition, these are the kinds of things that you should be paying attention to. And here are the accessibility codes that we need to try and create for. And so that's the beginning of the process. The next part of the process then looks at the level of modification required. So we work on projects both exterior to the home as well as the interior. And so, whether it's landscaping, repairing exterior concrete slabs that are uneven, or stone steps that are where there's loose stone on them, we can take care of anything on the exterior as well as the interior of the home. And then further, we probably 60% of our projects involve custom cabinetry. And my wife is a kitchen and bathroom designer. She represents half a dozen of Canada's leading cabinet companies. One of the things we recognized was that while there are accessibility cabinet offers, it's through some of these cabinet companies, it's always a sideline. And so after doing, a lot of custom cabinetry over the last couple of years, 6 months ago, we decided to create and launch a range of accessible cabinetry. And it's now under the name of Modi. And Modi was just formed. It's going to be launching June 1st, but we're already deploying programs for it. And what's really interesting is when it comes to, designing environments, able-bodied designers tend to look at the world facing down. But if you're somebody in a wheelchair or you use a walker and you sit in a kitchen using your walker, you're looking at eye level or you're looking up. So we talk about this kind of the plane of operation is your countertop. So how do we bring things to you, either, bring things from the bottom up or the top down to make it fully accessible. So we look at every way that we can optimize the space, and a lot of that executionally is through our cabinet design company called Modi. That really describes the range of offer.
That's really cool. And especially since most people are going to have at least a disability by the time they reach their senior years. Like,
for sure.
Come on. Just your average Joe contractor should be doing this stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's one of these things that, before the advent of the internet, it was basically you take your message and you get it out to as many people as possible. And it's like casting a wide net and hope that you pull in a fish. Today, most contractors are aiming still at that mass market. But what the internet allows us to do is to find these kind of vertical segments, sub-segments that represent a big population of people. So we know, 20 to 25% of people have some form of accessible challenge. Doesn't necessarily need lead to renovations. We also know that we've got an aging population that's significant here in Ottawa. So I think for the average contractor, they look at the world and they go, well, if 100 customers want to modify do a renovation this year, maybe only 10% or 15% will have accessibility issues. They're not paying attention to what is this big audience if you specialize. And that's why for us, the only thing we do is healthcare and accessibility renovations. We don't do, if somebody called us up, we get these calls occasionally and say, I want to modify my kitchen. First question I ask is, do you have an accessibility issue? And if they say no, I say, I'm sorry, we don't work in that space. And the significance of that is, every day that we do this, the different kinds of conditions we work with, we just become more and more expert at understanding exactly how to optimize a home for accessibility. So again, it's not a sideline for us. It's the only thing we do.
Precisely, because, our requirements are not niche. This is going to be everybody.
Yeah.
So it's not a niche population. It is everybody.
No, and the other thing I'd add, and we've talked about this a lot with Modi. The very first thing that we started with in trying to understand designs, because we focus we focus our attention primarily around kitchens, bathrooms, mudrooms, and laundry rooms. The fact is that while the starting point was people in wheelchairs, customers in wheelchairs, there's a lot of transfer of what is traditionally called accessibility design to really universal design. I'll give you a perfect example of this. So the average Canadian woman is 5'4". The average Canadian man is between 5'8" and 5'9". But the average cabinet height in a kitchen is anywhere from 76 to 84 inches. So the average kitchen for an able-bodied user, about a third of it is challenging to access, whether it's an odd corner design cabinet or it's the height. A lot of cabinets are just not properly accessible for an able-bodied user. Now, when you put that into a scenario when you've got somebody with an accessibility challenge, that number goes up dramatically. We go into kitchens where people just accept that they can't access any of their upper cabinets. So half their kitchen is not useful to them. And and again, we get into, as I say, particularly with I'd say broadly with cabinetry design, it's not the design of the box per se, it's the detail of how you do it. It's the heights, it's the way that you put equipment technology within drawers or cabinets that help organize things differently, give you fuller access. And again, if you're an able-bodied designer, you're just not seeing the world the way somebody does, and so you're just kind of replicating what you think most of the market needs, and that's not the way we do it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I also saw on your website that you have a process tab and a resource tab.
Yeah.
What goes into these different tabs?
So the process tab really is just describing broadly how it works and what you can expect from us. So in simple terms, if you were to contact us, we would schedule, we'd often have a conversation initially, understand your issue. We'd organize a home assessment. Off the back of the home assessment, we take copious notes, lots of pictures, and then we produce a full report. We go over that report with you with our recommended modifications. And then once that kicks in, we then schedule the project. And one of the things that we insist on, and this is again probably largely coming from my background, I take very seriously the fact that for the average customer, they may never have done this in their life before. And I take very seriously that we show up on time every time, that if we say we're going to be there at 9, that we're there at 9. And if we say it's going to take 4 weeks, it takes 4 weeks. So we don't dip in and out, stay for 2 days, leave, come back a week later. We manage the process. We are in regular contact with our clients. We share images with them through the process if they're not living on site. And then everything is documented from the amount of hours that we believe is required to perform the task, and we break out separately what are the material costs. And then you've got a full accounting of that. And then at the end, we kind of do a recap of all that and say on the basis of what we said we wanted to achieve, here's what we've achieved. Here's what we believe that you should pay, and this is, yes, we're spot on, or maybe it's a bit less, maybe it's a bit more, depending on the decisions clients make. And so that process is kind of described there. In addition, we often are asked. We're registered with Veterans Affairs and Medavie Blue Cross. We do a lot of work with veterans, and we also are registered with an organization called HCI, which is a body that represents Ontario insurance companies. And we do a lot of work on clients with catastrophic automotive claims. And so we'll often have to support our clients in the level of documentation to satisfy the insurance adjuster. In addition, many of our clients apply for tax credits or grants. We have to document, correctly the information that the government needs, or an organization like March of Dimes might need to make an informed decision. Because of course, you've got somebody that's working in an office. They, haven't met the client. They haven't been to their home. They don't realize the reality. And really, my job is to paint as clear a picture as possible for the assessor to understand what life is like for the client. So that's part of our process. On the resource side, we at the end of last year, we published what I believe is the only book written on how to design a home for accessibility. And that book, we consulted clinicians, medical professionals, as well as people who advise on accessibility. And it basically says you're a family, you need to make these modifications. Here's the range of conditions, and here's, based on the condition, what you should look at within your home. And we talk about things like, grants and tax credits and how to hire a contractor, and we document it fully. So that book is also an amazing resource. We get rave reviews on it. And then we publish a lot of content. So we produce a monthly newsletter, and we produce 5 articles, and those articles are looking at the role of design, technology, lifestyle. There's one of the articles is called Caregiver Corner. So we're also talking about what it's like to be a caregiver to somebody who's got a need, and what that challenge can be like. And it's been incredibly well received.
It would be, absolutely. I've never heard of that book, and now I want to read it.
Well, I'll get you a copy.
Cool. Knowing that every home is different and every disability is different, what would a common trip through adaptive living look like for one of your clients?
Yeah, so it's funny because I start the process outside. The moment I pull up, I open the file, I take pictures. The most common things I'm noticing is that the access and egress to the home is often not suitable. The common things I'll notice are trip hazards because of the unevenness of patio stones, or the thresholds that join the driveway to the walkway, inadequate railings, getting into the home, the threshold that's there. If we're dealing with somebody who is using a walker or wheelchair, I'm looking at the dimensions of the door space. And I look at tells like scraping, scrape marks along the interior door frames or the door itself. So I'm, if you're approaching this from, if I'm approaching a home, I'm looking at, can someone with the condition that I understand they have, can they navigate easily in and out of their home, and are the door widths appropriate? And then as I go through the home, I'm looking at everything from I hate to say this, but I'm looking at the level of clutter. I'm looking at the dimensions, the spaces between furniture. Can people navigate through that? Again, I'm looking a lot at thresholds, even interior thresholds. Homes are all over the map. You've got homes that are 100 years old. You've got homes that are 50 years old, and then you've got modern homes. They're all different. Like, we've got clients who walk into a home, and as you probably know, the minimum door width, clearance width for both a walker and a wheelchair user is 32 inches. Well, I'm in a home recently, their bathroom door is 26 inches. And so I'm looking at all of the details that impede progress or affect safety. So, and I go basically top to bottom, and the client is probably most of the time with me as I'm going through the space. But as I'm going along, I'm taking pictures, taking notes, asking questions, and then I summarize that in the report. So it's basically a walk around their home, trying to understand. So where do you sit? Where do you eat? How do you, where do you do meal prep? I'm looking at taking measurements and kind of poking around, trying to find if the environment is suitable for their needs.
Brilliant. Absolutely. It has to be an immersive process. And I imagine it has to be a very holistic process. Like you say, you go like out to in, top to bottom, just everything. And with their input, which is definitely appreciated when you're us, because we tend to have a lack of autonomy, especially when it comes to our lived in space.
Yeah.
There's a tendency for us not to live alone even, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, is the caretaker the one to determine all this? Probably yes, but they shouldn't be, because it's not their body. It's not their wheelchair or their walker or their cane or whatever.
Well, and what you bring up is, what's interesting about that is where you have to design for both an able-bodied and a disabled person in the same environment, and where that's probably the most acute challenge is in the kitchen, and so I'll give you an example. We have, we're working with a couple. They've been together for 40 years. And So up until 6 months, one of the partners was able to walk, and since then she's been in a wheelchair. And the home that they've lived in for several years now is no longer suitable for one of the people in the relationship. And so we've had to go in and look at modifying aspects of their bathroom, from installing an angled toilet in the bathroom. We're building a custom vanity that's roll under. We're widening doorways. We've created basically a pop-up prep station that's suitable for the client who's in the wheelchair, so that they can actually participate, because the countertops are, they're often 36 inches high, absolutely way beyond what this individual can use. And so we modify, and that's a relatively straightforward modification. This isn't tearing your kitchen apart. It's basically, we've created using, in their case, they wanted a very beautiful kind of wood. We custom design it, install it, pops up, and then they can both make meals together and participate. So, it's being respectful that it's, we're not just, in the case of living, with an able-bodied person, it's not just modifying it for the individual. It's recognizing that you may have to have staggered counter heights because, they're not operating in the same way. So it can be a challenge. Sorry, and the other thing I'll add is, this is really important. I was visiting a client earlier today, and this is a case of, again, it was an adult child of a senior who has been diagnosed with ALS. They had built a kind of an in-law suite for them, but he's had several falls. He can't navigate the stairs anymore. He likes to do prep work with his wife, and his kitchen is not suitable. Doesn't have the required 60-inch turning radius for a wheelchair. And and their bathroom needs significant modifications. What I say to clients is, look, there's accessibility code, and then there's a reality of where you live. And it's trying to maximize. Not every client's going to say, just tear it all apart and rebuild it. We have to work with what's there. And so it's often a balancing act. So it's not just a balancing act if you've got an able-bodied and a disabled person living at the home. It's basically also trying to manage, the realities of their space and how you get the most out of it for them, because they can't just tear it down and rebuild. They've got to modify what's there.
Absolutely, because that would also be ludicrously expensive. So you have to min-max the renovations.
For sure.
Like do as little work for as much impact as possible.
Yeah, that's right.
So what is the one thing that you see happening over and over again to individuals with disabilities that shouldn't be, and how do you think we stop it?
That's a good question. What do I see most often? I think the thing that I see most often is probably, I'll separate out somebody that was born with a condition or has lived with a condition for a while, who has lived in a space for a while and may have existing modifications, versus people that may have, a disability forced upon them, like somebody who's had a catastrophic car accident. We have a client, for instance, that last Thanksgiving, and he was a big guy. His wife is a medical doctor, and at Thanksgiving dinner, he started getting pain in his back. His legs started to burn. He went down on the floor rather, to rub his legs out. Couldn't stand up. And within 60 minutes, he was paraplegic, and he had a spinal cord stroke. He's now in a wheelchair. So, in a case like that, this is somebody that's gone, oh my God, like, now what? We live in a house. Is it even suitable for me to maintain my lifestyle? So there's, the difference is, if somebody's something thrust upon them, or they've got a progressive condition that they don't yet realize what they're going to face. They're two separate situations. So what we would encounter probably most is just a lack of understanding about what should be done, what can be done. The meeting that I was at today with a gentleman who's been diagnosed with ALS, his daughter was like, I said, well, have you guys looked at stair lifts here? Because he's not yet in a wheelchair. And she's like, we haven't even looked at anything. Like, so, one thing you encounter a lot of is people just don't even realize what should be done. So that's pretty common. The other thing that's very common is just severely restrictive spaces. I would say my experience is probably 95% of homes can be modified, but in the 5% that can't, they simply can't. And it's also giving people advice that maybe it's time to sell and reconsider moving to something that's more accessible. There's also common things like we will get called in to look at correcting work that was done by somebody that isn't qualified to do accessibility modifications. So, a very, very simple thing that we see all the time is the use of tiles in wet environments. People obviously are motivated, primarily when it comes to the design of their home. They're often motivated by aesthetics, and that doesn't necessarily align with accessibility first. And that doesn't mean, we take a lot of pride in creating. We talk about it, I think, on the website. The what we call the hospital hangover. It's about avoiding design that makes you feel like you're living in a clinic. But we'll often go in and grab bars haven't been installed correctly. Tiles that shouldn't be in a wet environment are present, and they're a massive slip risk. That's a very, very common thing that we see. And then, of course, the most probably common of all is, how do you manage the investment? And the thing that I often say to clients is, one, if your home isn't accessible and it can't be made accessible, then definitely look at an alternative. We encourage people to stay in the home, and that's not just because of the work we do, but the costs here of assisted living of any sort is astronomical. And, you paid off your house 20 years ago, and, you got some equity, you live in a neighborhood, your whole community is there, your memories are there, your friends are there, the shops you like going to are there. And the idea of uprooting all that and moving into assisted living where it's $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month, it pulls the roots up of everything that you've lived with for a long time, and it costs you a fortune. So we try and find a way to make the home work. So the final part of the thing we encounter is that question, like, what's it going to cost? And unfortunately, it's not a straightforward answer. It really depends on the kind of modifications that you need to make.
Absolutely. You hear stories about these old houses with multiple stories and long and crooked or narrow staircases.
Mm.
And your elderly grandmother is having balance issues. And what happens one day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, assisted living is so incredibly expensive, even here, like away from the heartland. So away from Toronto, away from Ottawa, like the big city kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where it would be more expensive, of course. But I mean, people don't want to leave their homes, and that's perfectly understandable. Like you say, you've got your memories and your community there.
Yeah. There's absolutely no question. I mean, I can only imagine, the case of that 94-year-old woman that I mentioned. It was a, massive 3-story house. It had a cellar that was just basically bedrock and, concrete walls where she continued to do her laundry. And in that particular case, she didn't have adequate railings going downstairs. And so the problem is, it's a massive fall risk. And even if she had her phone with her, which, she didn't carry around, getting help would be very, very difficult. But at the same time, you look at this person and she raised 3 kids in this home, or she lived her life with her husband in this home. She had no desire to move, even though the home was completely impractical for her circumstances. And I completely get it. You go through the home, all you see is pictures of her family and her memories, and you think, oh yeah, I'm going to pack that up and move to some kind of antiseptic assisted living environment, with people living on me. For me, I think I'd rather die in my sleep in the home that I raised my kids in than go into an environment like that.
Emotionally, I do agree with you, because you can get a very institutional feel at these sorts of places.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help with your mental health, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If someone wanted to become a client, what is the process for joining as a client?
Well, the simplest thing is to either call me directly. My phone number's on the site. Or there's also an intake form. All we ask is just to, put in your name, email address, and phone number with a little bit of detail on what you're hoping for, and we do immediate follow-ups. Like within 24 hours, you'll have a contact from us, and often within a matter of days, we'll be on site doing the assessment. The additional thing is we offer an urgent service, which I left out of our earlier question, which is, a lot of clients just come to us and say, I've had a fall and I need some grab bars installed. And we have guys that just do those simpler projects. So, it's anybody that's at risk can give us a call or reach out to us through the website, and we'll get in touch. We often get contacted from people who aren't within the area that we trade in, and we offer free advice. I've sent our book off to people, not knowing that they'd never necessarily become a client of ours, but we're always here to help. So if you have any questions, by all means, reach out.
If listeners are looking for more information, how can they reach out to you?
They can reach me at my phone number is area code 343-572-7290, and my email address is robert.hocking, which is HOCKING, at adaptiveliving.ca. Adaptive living is all one word.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Robert.
Of course, my pleasure. Anytime.
That was a really informational interview. Very nice.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks. I enjoyed doing it.
Thank you. You've been listening to a Community Partners interview on Voices for Ability Radio. I'm your host, Lilly Cereghini. And remember, folks, stick together because we are all in this together.